The moment came and I said no, and he said, really? I'm really glad that he understood, or seemed to understand, why I made the choice. I still can't believe I actually said it, though.
Hello, Ariana Debose.
Hi.
Welcome to IndieWire.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So I want to go back in time a little bit to where you grew up, which is more or less Raleigh, North Carolina.
Essentially. I'm very much a Carolina girl. Like, I was born in Wilmington, spent time in New Bern, North Carolina, then moved to Raleigh, the Raleigh-Wake Forest area. So I kind of have ties to what feels like the whole state. But
And what inspired you to join up with So You Think You Could Dance?
Oh, man.
And how old were you then?
You know, I went to a dance studio. It's now called CC and Company Dance Complex, and we were a competitive dance studio. And my teacher at the time was bringing in all these different choreographers because she wanted us to have an incredibly versatile understanding of dance. When the first season of So You Think came around, I knew so many of the choreographers because they had come to my studio. And then some of the folks that were on the show, Travis Wall, Martha Nichols, she was on season 2, but I grew up dancing with them. So I guess I got it in my head that if there was a show I could potentially get on, that it was that one. And they were having a good experience, or it looked like they were having a good experience. And I loved what the show was doing for dance. People were talking about dance. So I guess that's what inspired me to do it, the people around me. And it seemed tangible. And then somehow, I don't know, by some miracle, I ended up on the show. And then by another miracle, they voted me off the first week.
But it gave you a bit of a charge and a lift. Did it change the trajectory of where you were going?
I think so. You know, I mean, had I not had that experience, I don't think I would have pursued New York. I would have stayed in LA and pursued, strictly professional dancing. I'd always said I did want to grow up to be Madonna's backup dancer. That was my redirect. And I also, that was a trying time because it made me question whether I actually had talent or validity in a way, which I think is, unfortunate. But it does happen to lots of young artists, and it happened to me in a big way because I was so young and it was such a public brush with rejection. But it made me stronger. Like I developed a really thick skin, but it also gave me the skills to be able to audition for any style of dance. Like, it did give me the knowledge that, like, no, if you can get on the show, then you can actually dance anything. So I ended up in New York.
You became, in short order, a rather amazing Broadway performer.
Thank you.
You didn't seem to languish for too long in the chorus.
No, I was lucky. I auditioned, kind of straight through for about 3 or 4 months before I really started booking work. And those months were really important because it taught me, what we all go through. I was learning the ropes and paying my dues, and, those non-equity lines are tough. Even the equity lines are tough, It can be a dog-eat-dog world. But I got my first job was Bring It On the musical. I know, a cheerleading musical. But that taught me how to make a musical because I did the whole process. And then the out-of-town tryout, the national tour, and then the Broadway show. And I was a featured role in that, and then I went back to the ensemble in Motown. So strictly ensemble working, and I became an understudy for Diana Ross, and that was a completely different skill set. Very humbling, because when you're an onstage understudy, it's challenging. And that character, Brandon Victor Dixon, was playing Barry Gordy, and he's quite the actor, in my opinion, and an incredible vocalist. So I had to summon my courage and any skill set I thought I had as a vocalist at the time. But it's another step in the journey that made me better. And then after that, I left the show. I seem to have a thing where my contracts expire, and then instead of renewing, I move on. And that apparently is not the norm for many of my colleagues, but I really believe in challenging myself. So I did leave that show, and then Pippin came along, and that was a completely different style of dance that I hadn't taken on. It was still very much the Fosse choreography, but I was also understudying leading player, so I had to learn how to fly trapeze. So I'm adding skills and taking on harder roles. And I was really grateful for that challenge. It gave me another sense of confidence that I could do this thing too. And then Hamilton found me. And that was wild.
So you were in Hamilton for a couple of years?
Yeah, I did a lot of...
In the original show?
I'm original company.
And you ended up in the
Hamilton.
Disney show too.
I did. Well, it was really crazy. So we were doing our Tony run. We just won the Tony. And then Lynn was about to leave the show, and coincidentally, that was also my last show. So we very quickly made that film before everyone left. And I'm really glad they did it, because that original company, there's something that is really special about the connection. And while the show is brilliant, no matter who is playing these roles, that original company really, I don't know, it just... we could all see ourselves in it, and you can still see yourself in the show no matter where or when you see it, but it was just really special.
Is The Prom your first movie experience?
We were making West Side Story, so West Side Story was my first movie experience, and then I booked The Prom, but The Prom was given to the world first.
So West Side Story is a dream, I imagine, for anyone. What was your relationship to the original movie?
Oh, I saw it from a very young age. I think I was 7 or 8. I was enamored with the woman in the purple dress. And it wasn't until much later that I realized who she was and why she was so important, you know? Rita Moreno, first Latina to win an Academy Award. I find her to be such a beautiful example of expansion, that, you know, women like us can not only be successful, but we can expand our careers. She and Debbie Allen really were that for me.
Oye, Javi, ponle fuego, vamos!
So Rita Moreno, I happened to see the documentary about her. The ways that this extraordinarily talented woman wasn't able to truly shine as much as she might have been able to if she'd had her chance. And obviously West Side Story gave it to her, and she ran with it. And Anita is one of the great parts. And you're playing Anita. Talk a little bit about why that role shines.
Anita's arguably one of the greatest roles ever written for women, especially women of color. And it is that because you run the gamut of emotion, and the circumstances that this woman is put in are incredibly trying. I think being able to show a woman with agency in the context of this time period, you know, our film takes place in 1957, but that was not a time where women were encouraged to speak our minds. We may have been running businesses, but we certainly weren't getting the credit for it. Anita was fire and is fire, passion, love. You get to see someone own their body in a positive light. You also watch a woman go through great grief. And for me, that is what has always stood out in this character. I think Rita perhaps was not allowed to fully explore that. I actually thought about this very deeply this morning. I woke up with this. I'm very grateful to Tony Kushner because he expanded this script in such a way that gave this Anita the opportunity to fully own all facets of her emotion, because you got to see her in even more circumstances. You know, the original 61 film didn't connect certain dots. Anita came in and then she came out. It felt like she was used as, you know, an entertainment device, right? Even though Rita's portrayal is so deep and so grounding for that specific film, Anita has the same function in our film. She has more material. She gets to be seen in a different light. And I credit that largely to Tony Kushner, but also because he believed I had the capacity to do it.
Talk about the audition process.
It felt short. I really feel like West Side Story found me. I was really not looking for it. In fact, I remember reading the press release and I was like, that sounds like it could be really good. I'm someone who believes in revivals. I believe in breathing new life into classic stories. I think it's important, actually. So I was like, this could be really good. I'm not getting that job.
Why did you feel that way?
Well, Anitas don't really look like me, save for Debbie Allen. Traditionally, Anitas look like Rita Moreno. and they look like Karen Olivo, and they look like Chita Rivera. They are not Afro-Latina. And the role has never explored that lived experience prior to this version of West Side Story, for that matter. You know, Black Latinas, it's a different way that we walk through the world. Someone asked me, like, specifically, well, what's the big difference? And I was like, well, the reality is, given the state of the world, I'm a Black woman. When I walk down the street, I'm still treated like a Black woman. Whereas a white Latina walks down the street, you still are white presenting. So you're getting different types of prejudice and discrimination coming towards you. And we don't traditionally get to talk about that or explore that. It was so interesting. We made this film, and then the pandemic happened, and then we saw the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement. And it really got me. It still gets me, you know? And I think that movement also is what makes this film so relevant right now. Because while you're talking about Hispanics and, you know, Irish immigrant gangs, it's the same. Hate is hate is hate is hate is hate. And senseless, needless death, it knows no race, religion, or creed. It's still senseless and needless.
So how do you feel about critics of this musical who say that the people who wrote it and the people who wrote the music don't know anything about Puerto Rican culture?
I can only really speak from my experience with this film. And I can tell you, this was a group of folks, don't have my lived experience, but they let my colleagues inform every single one of these characters and what was actually happening. They cared enough to ask. They cared enough to go to the Puerto Rican people. They went to Puerto Rico, the University of Puerto Rico. They sat down with folks and wanted to know what their grievances with the 61 film were so they could correct them. And then they went a step further. When we were making this film, they brought in folks who were living in San Juan Hill in these 20 blocks during 1957 so they could speak to us about their lived experience. Because guess what? I wasn't alive then. They cared enough to do this right and to make this movie with respect and dignity. And quite frankly, I really do believe this. If they can go the extra mile and do the research and bring in the dialect coaches and bring in the experts that represent both groups of people, if they can do it, I think members of Hollywood at large can do it. And I'm new, so, you know, I talk a big game, but, like, I do believe if he can do it, then the rest of us can.
If you go with him, no one will ever forgive you.
And I think that's what I didn't say prior. You know, this character does get to sing and dance and act the whole gamut. Like, I think what makes West Side Story so brilliant to me is the music. The Bernstein score actually tells the story without you having to see anything. And as a dancer, like, I speak dance better than I speak English, if I'm honest. When I listened to the music, I just, it tells you what to do. And then it's the moment where I'm listening and it's speaking to me, and then I allow it to tell me what to do. But the music is never dancing me, I am dancing it. It's a language. So it is hard to explain, but I love that because it's so honest. And so for me, Anita starts there. There's always a rhythm to her, even in her speech patterns. When she's still, it's for a reason, and when she moves, it's for a reason. Everything is a choice. But the music told me what to do. The lyrics, I love Sondheim's lyrics because they are simple and they are honest, and they're not showy. You don't actually have to do a lot. They do the work for you. And so all I needed to do is meet the moment by being present. And there was a lot going on at the time in the world. There were kids being thrown in cages, and, you know, people were dying, you know. And I brought a lot of my own lived experience to the character as well. This is also a woman who is, you know, desperately trying to assimilate, and she believes in her American dream. And in order to achieve that, assimilation is the answer. Speak English is the answer. And then you watch your American dream disappear in 2 days. Yikes. It hurts.
Is there a scene that upset you more than any other scene? I have an idea what it might be.
I can tell you the scene that gets me is the candy store scene. the rave scene.
Of course.
It's
pretty hard to watch.
It's hard to watch. A Boy Like That also gets me, just because the grief is so raw. But the candy store scene is tough because she's gone there just to help the young girl she loves. She's made the choice. It's selfless, in my opinion. Like, she's not getting anything out of this. But the second you watch the character walk into the store, you know she's not walking out unchanged.
Yeah.
And as an actor, I don't have a problem playing in the dark. I actually, sounds twisted, but I enjoy playing in dark emotions and the exploration that they can afford you. But that was a scene where my mind knew that it wasn't real, but my body didn't. You know, I've seen the film 4 times now, and I don't watch it because it's very visceral, and you don't forget the feeling of 12 bodies on top of you with hands all over you in various places. And, you know, they ripped my dress, and at one point, you know, very respectfully, but there was a hand on my neck. And it breaks my heart that there are women in the world that's very real for them. And it's just simulated for me, and I still feel it.
There's something to be sitting in a theater watching an audience respond. What was that like the first time?
Really cool. Because I'll be honest, when I first saw the film, I saw it with 4 of my colleagues, and I thought I'd ruined the movie.
No.
Yeah, well, we were watching it on the Fox lot, and they're huge movie theaters, and it was just very quiet. And I was like, I think I might have, maybe I messed it up. So then when we finally did get to hear the reactions to the film, I guess it eased my mind that they understood the characters, you know? Not just my character, all of our characters. Like, people seem to really get it. Actually, Debbie Allen was sitting behind me last night at the premiere, and like I've mentioned earlier, she means a lot to me. And I got to hear her laugh and cackle and, you know, say, "Dance, children, dance." And then I heard her sniffle, and her daughter Vivian Nixon, who's a friend, was with her. And I was like, okay. I didn't know I needed to hear that.
Oh.
Yeah.
Had you met her before?
I had. I was a part of her Kennedy Center Honor Tribute, which was like the honor, one of the greatest honors of my career thus far. Because, I don't know, she was doing it before anybody realized she was doing it. Like, she was directing, she was producing, like she was producing her own specials, right? Like choreographing the Oscars, like dancing, starring in her own work. Like, I just think that's the epitome of a boss. I don't know, like, that's amazing.
So talk a little bit about working with Spielberg. So you had to have met him for the first time at some point.
You know, the first time I met him, I was at Hamilton. It was like a meeting in passing. I watched him write on the wall, "This is history." He signed his name, and I was like, wow, that's cool. And I thanked him for coming to our little skit, and he was like, "Little skit?" I was like, yeah. And he was like, no, it's momentous, it's monumental. Then when I went into first audition, I didn't actually realize he was gonna be there. And I certainly didn't expect to walk in and him be like, "You're that girl from the hallway in Hamilton." Like, that's not a reality. When he asked me to read for him, I told him no. Classic. And the reason was I was starring on Broadway at the time, and I had seen the scenes. I got them very late at night, like 10:30 at night, and I was like, I have to go to sleep because you want me to come in at 10 a.m. the next day. Whoa, and these are very wordy Tony Kushner scenes, and I would really like to not embarrass myself. I was like, I just got a good leading role on Broadway. I would like to continue the trend of good work. So I told Cindy Tolan that I would prefer to not read that day, but I would come back if they liked what I did. And of course I walk in and there he is. I just wanted to die a little bit. But the moment came and I said no, and he said, "Really?" And Cindy explained, and he was like, "You're not gonna read?" And I said, "No, sir." And he said, will you come back? And I said, I'd be honored. And I'm really glad that he was, that he understood or seemed to understand why I made the choice. I still can't believe I actually said it though.
You're not Puerto Rican.
Is that okay?
Do you want to start World War III?
When I made the decision to try for bigger parts, especially in the Broadway community, like I was known for my dance work, and not that I think that dancers are slighted frequently, but I will say that I think we have to work harder to change people's minds. And so it was very apparent to me that every audition that I took that gave me the opportunity to show what I could do as an actor, I could not walk in unprepared. It was just not an option. And auditioning for a Spielberg film, even though it's not a Broadway show, like, you're not walking in unprepared. That is just foolish. So I was grateful to have a casting director who had my back. Cindy Tolan, rock on.
What have you got coming up next? You've got another indie movie. You're going to actually do movies now.
Yeah, I will. A few people seem to want to let me make them. So, and I like making them. I really do. It's a new challenge. I'm learning something new every film that I accept. I made an indie film called ISS with Gabby Calverthwaite, and it's a space movie. It takes place on the International Space Station. I don't sing or dance. It's amongst some incredible actors, like just incredible actors. Chris Messina is playing one of the leads, and I've respected him for a long time. And then I also just finished production on Matthew Vaughn's Argyle, which is his next big project, and I just think he's such an elegant action filmmaker.
Did you do stunts?
I didn't do as many stunts this film, but I think there might be plans to have me do some other things in the future. So we'll see what happens. But I like stunt work. I love being physical. So that seemed actually quite logical to me to pursue like action films or films in general that allow me to use my physicality, because it is a strength. Play to your strengths, right?
Absolutely. But Broadway is still your love.
I do have such a deep love for Broadway, and I do miss it. I miss the Broadway stage. I will go back. I'm looking for the right project. I have a few ideas, but you gotta really flesh it out first, And who knows, maybe I'll do a play. I have no idea.
The world is your oyster.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ariana Debose.
Thank you so much for your time.